the Brodie Oaks one first. Maybe we can get through that. And is this in your district?
Yes, it is in my district. I have quite a few.
When we get at the end of the presentation, I'm going to recognize you first after the presentation is over. Manager, do you want to call up the presentation on Brodie Oaks?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Council. We'll just get started right away. I'll turn it over to Jerry Restoven, who will introduce this topic.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Jerry Restoven with the Housing and Planning Department. We are here to discuss the development assessment for the Brodie Oaks PUD. Just as a reminder, the City Council, the PUD process requires that the applicant submit a development assessment, which can also be looked at as a dry run prior to actually submitting the application. We review this this assessment, we provide comments to the applicant, and we give a briefing to the City Council, both to give you a preview of a case that's going to be coming your way after, quite frankly, probably quite a few months of staff review, but it also gives a chance for the City Council to provide input to both the staff and the applicant on the kind of things that the council will be looking for out of the PUD when the actual application comes in. This property is located at the northwest corner of Ben White Boulevard and South Lamar. The project was developed in 1981. It was originally a 128-acre piece of property. At that time, 84 acres was donated to the city, which became the portion of the Barton Creek Greenbelt. And the remainder, 37 acres, was developed as the Brodie Oaks shopping center and office complex. This property is located in Imagine Austin Activity Center. It is also located at an important transit node of Project Connect. And it is also located, obviously, within the Barton Springs recharge zone, a very environmentally sensitive area. The PUD is proposing a redevelopment of the shopping center into a new development that would comprise approximately 1,500 residential units, 1.1 million square feet of office space, 450 hotel rooms, 110,000 square feet of office space, and 30,000 square feet of restaurant space. The applicant is proposing heights of up to 275 feet, closest to the intersection of Ben White and South Lamar, with a transition down to 160 feet, more interior to the development, and then down to a limit of 28 feet within the open space and parkland areas. The applicant is proposing to reduce the existing impervious cover of 84%, is proposing to reduce that down to 54%, a reduction of 36%. This would result in a total of almost 14 acres of impervious cover being removed and brought into private open space and parkland. This would be 8.9 acres more than what they are required to do under code. They also are proposing nearly a mile of trails. This property, to me, is kind of a very important one. It kind of brings three things together. As I said, it's in a very environmentally sensitive area. It's at a very important transit node for Project Connect with the existing 803 bus, rapid bus, as well as the improvements that are going to be made with Project Connect. And it is, quite frankly, a shopping center that's past its prime and has suffered some vacancies in recent years. So it is prime for redevelopment. It's important that we try to bring it back closer to today's code environmentally as possible. And we also want to, of course, because it is located along the bus rapid transit line, it is an opportunity for us to have a rather large site and to develop it in a very transit-friendly way, including affordable housing. So what I would like to do now is turn it over to Rebecca Leonard from Lionheart Placemaking, who is a planning firm that is working on this project on behalf of Barship and Knowles, the applicant, and she will run through a PowerPoint presentation, and with that, her and I will both be available for any questions afterwards.
Perfect. Thank you, Jerry. It looks like I'm unable to share my screen, so we'll just operate off of the PowerPoint that you have pulled up already. Would you go to the next slide, please? Thank you all for having us today. I'm Rebecca Leonard with Lionheart Places, an East Austin business. I'd like to introduce parts of my team here. The landowner is Barshop and Knowles and Lionstone Investments. Barshop and Knowles has been a longtime local developer in Austin. Central Market was one of their early projects. In addition, we've got a host of other local team members, Armbrust and Brown, LJA Engineering, BOE Consulting, etc. And we've been bolstered by several national leaders in the fields of planning, engineering, and design. Let me express our team's gratitude for your time today and ongoing dialogue about this project that you and your staff have had with us over the last several months. Next slide, please. Jerry mentioned where the site was. It's about 37.5 acres. It's about 3.5 miles from downtown. It's at the junction of 2 high-capacity transit routes. And we can't forget that it's a prominent location on the Barton Creek Greenbelt, very important amenity for our city. Next slide, please. Since this original, next slide, Jerry, I'm sorry. The original development was approved in 1981, and this was before Hill Country Overlay, before the SOS ordinance. It was 3 decades before Imagine Austin. A lot has changed in our city since this original development was approved. And I think the policy direction is pointing in a different direction than what it may have been 40 years ago. The parcel that we are talking about specifically in this PUD or development assessment is what's labeled there in orange, Brodie Oaks Shopping Center. The rest of this was part of that original approval in 1981. And you can see the 84 acres of Gusfrey Park on there as well. Next slide, please. Many of you have been out there, maybe even recently, and are aware of some of the beautiful amenities of the site. We have some fantastic views, I would argue some of the best in the city, off of the backside of the development. We also have a number of beautiful heritage trees, very large heritage trees, and groves of trees that are wonderful amenities to the site. Next slide, please. There are also some not so lovable parts of the site. As Jerry mentioned, it's 84% impervious cover, all surface parking. Before Bar Shop and Oals was able to obtain some of the TxDOT right-of-way, it was actually 90% impervious cover. So quite a bit of impervious cover right there on the recharge area. Also, the backside connecting to the green belt, there's a barrier of a wall that's anywhere from 8 to 20 feet tall, and it really prevents connection to the green belt. Next slide, please. So as we got into the planning for this project, we first started by looking at what the city was signaling they would like to see on this project. And as you all are very familiar with the Imagine Austin map, this is one of the 5 or 6 green dots, which are labeled in the Plan Activity Center for redevelopment in sensitive environmental areas. And I think we're the first green dot to attempt a redevelopment. And so we really are trailblazing on this project and seeking guidance from you all as to what a green dot means and what redevelopment should look like. In addition, I've noted already that we're on 2 high-capacity transit corridors, so really important connections there. It's also a site that doesn't have any immediate single-family neighbors. So this is an opportunity for us to have transit supportive density and affordable housing near a transit station without directly impacting single-family neighbors. And then finally, again, the affordable housing piece that any PUD has to provide, we are excited because we get to provide ours right next to one of our city's greatest transit lines. Next slide, please. So we share the city's highest goals for the site. We knew from the very beginning that we would have to meet the highest environmental standards. And I hope you all have seen that we've come out of the gates very strong in that regard. We also know that we need to create a walkable mixed-use activity center that will support that transit station. In addition, we also see huge opportunities to connect the site to its surroundings. There's either a fence, a major highway, or a wall that separates the site from almost every adjacent parcel. We also know that this development needs to feel and be of South Austin. This can't be something that could live in any other corner of our city or any other city in the US. And then finally, we want this site to continue to be a prominent gathering place in Southwest Austin. So we need to position it, as Jerry said, it's seen its life, the shopping center, and we need to position it into something new. Next slide, please. So this next slide is a conceptual master plan that we are currently working with. I wanted to point out a few things on this plan. First of all, we intend to comply with the SOS ordinance and store our water quality, our stormwater runoff into SOS ponds. We also include rolling back some of that impervious cover. About 13.7 acres of buildings and parking lots will transition to parks and open space. We intend to have an intentional trailhead. There's several trailheads that have evolved over time on shoulders of highways and internal to neighborhoods. And this is an opportunity for us to plan for a trailhead to Barton Creek Greenbelt from the very beginning. Also, we are developing at transit supportive densities. So we are looking for densities that will make that transit station really successful, a mix of uses that would allow people to park once and do many, many things. And again, include affordable housing near that. We also hope to include some art space and other creative space on site. And then finally, there are other signature quality public spaces, the central green in the middle. It's about approximately the size of Republic Square, surrounded by retail and restaurants on all sides, and programmed with family-friendly amenities to encourage people to come and spend time dawn to dusk and enjoying this new gathering place for Southwest Austin. Next slide, please. So the next couple slides just have some renderings of what some of these spaces would look like. This first rendering here is the internal main street. You can see dedicated pedestrian and bicycle facilities on this road, increased landscape treatment, retail on the ground floor, and residential, office, and hotel on the upper floors. In the background, you can see some of our tallest buildings on site. And what we've been trying to do with the architecture is make sure that it's eclectic and doesn't look like one campus, that it looks like it's evolved over time with varied styles, heights, step backs, and materials. Next slide, please. This slide is a view of the central green from one of the office buildings. You can see the green belt and downtown in the background, retail on the ground floor wrapping around that plaza space. The park amenities, we're hoping to include a playground, finally give that grove of trees a happy home, and have a picnic pavilion there, perhaps a performance venue, water play, social games. You can also see that we have increased the quality of the streetscapes for that internal drive. Next slide, please. So this image here is looking from the Greenbelt back to the site. And we wanted to show this because it really is one of our key strategies for connecting to the Greenbelt, is taking down that wall that exists around the backside of the Greenbelt and grading to more natural conditions, restoring 13.7 acres of land and allowing the Greenbelt to climb back up into the site to create that intentional trailhead for people to access the Greenbelt. We hope to reduce heat island effect by reducing pavement and planting more trees, focusing on multimodal travel by clustering density around the transit stop. Next slide, please. So the main dilemma and the big idea from the beginning of this project, and you all grappled with it in Imagine Austin, was balancing environmental sensitivity with activity and transit supportive densities. And that's what we hope that we've done. On one side, we have environmental sensitivity. We want to reduce impervious cover. We want to meet the SOS water quality standards. We want to provide quality public outdoor spaces for people. And on the other side, we need the height and the density next to transit to really make a successful transit supportive density. As we go through the feedback that we've received so far, a couple key questions are coming to mind, and we would love your feedback on these specifically. Next slide, please. First one is land area requests. The code requirements and reviewer comments resulted in nearly 30 acres of land requests, and the site's only 37.6 acres. So the viability of this project is really contingent on our ability to prioritize these or overlap these and multi-purpose some of the space. And so I put this slide in here so that we could encourage council to give us feedback on what your highest priorities are. Next slide, please. In addition, we've had comments from reviewers and stakeholders that the height may be a little too high. So we've got 275-foot height limits around the outer edge near the highways. And we want more feedback, more direct feedback on that. We're trying to provide transit supportive densities here within walking distance of a transit stop. And so I really encourage you all to let us know what you think the appropriate height would be. We've put in some metrics around employment density and residential density from professional journals, transportation research record for employment density around transit stops, and the city's own TOD ordinance for density around transit stops of residential units. In addition, some of the TODs already approved in the city are already seeing heights of about 360 feet. And then finally, just related to height, there has been an assumption that this will be very visible from the Greenbelt, and we've got the next slide here has a section of what that could look like. We have walked the entire Greenbelt trail and the creek bed itself and have not been able to see the site from those areas, mainly due to topography and tree canopy. And so we believe from these key public spaces that this development will still be hidden and be something that has the benefit of viewing and providing access to the Greenbelt without it being looming or over the top of the Greenbelt. Last slide, please. So in closing, we've approached this project in the spirit of trading SOS water quality compliance, more public open space, and a reduction of impervious cover in return for an increase in height and density at a site adjacent to a designated Cap Metro transfer station in Project Connect. That's the foundation of this project, and we would really appreciate any comments from council on our approach. Thank you.
So Mayor, if I could just add as a city planner, this is a very exciting project for us. As we said, it's a site that's ripe for redevelopment. It's at a core transit location, and it also is a site that, frankly, is crying out for redevelopment. So we look forward to working with the applicant on this one. We know it's going to be a challenge, but we're excited about the opportunity.
Okay. This is a heads up to the council, and they're looking for feedback. If anybody wants to give them any at this point, we'll begin with Ann.
Okay. Thank you very much. I want to say this is in my district. It borders on Councilmember Ellis's district also. It's very close to Councilmember Tovo's, Councilmember Renteria's districts also. So I have a lot of questions, which I will not use up everybody's time today for. I just want to make some comments and then provide some comments in response to the questions that the applicant has asked. And I'll be succinct about it. But let me just say first that I appreciate the efforts that the applicant is making to reach out to the neighbors, the neighborhoods all around this redevelopment, as well as with the other groups that are impacted by this, the environmental groups, SOS, Barton Creek Greenbelt. I appreciate their efforts and I appreciate their willingness to get this right. And so I am optimistic that we can get there. I don't think they're there right now. I don't think as proposed it meets the criteria that we need to apply to a place like that, but I am encouraged, and it will be challenging, as Jerry said, but I am encouraged that we can get to a place that works. So I want to just name a few of the considerations that we need to think about for this height, and then quickly speak to questions that Ms. Leonard had asked. So first off, the bottom line is this is the first environmental center, the first green spot from Imagine Austin that we have been confronted with. And so we've really got to get it right. It is a center node in a water supply environmental sensitive area. So we have to get it's also a PUD, and it's a redevelopment under the SOS ordinance. So we need to get this right in terms of balancing the community benefit with the request for the additional size, as Ms. Leonard had laid out. So, a couple of things. Affordability is key. What's the appropriate level of affordable housing? How can we think about family supportive housing along this transit center hub? That's going to be very important. I don't think we're there yet if we're just talking about the minimum of 10% more. Second thing, open green space use in connection to the green belt. I appreciate the efforts that have been made there so far. We need to think about that further. Third thing is the environmental impact and the greening of the buildings. We want to minimize the negative impact to the recharge zone of the aquifer, and we want to make this a really exciting, cutting edge, living green architectural structures place. Creative space, I appreciate Ms. Leonard mentioning that. This is a very exciting opportunity for South Austin to be a space for artists, dedicated retail and outdoor market space for local artists. And then finally, the height and the mobility issues, as was pointed out, is something we've got to get right. We're looking at 275 feet. That is much, much taller than anything around. We're talking 25 stories or so, which is quite a bit of height. It also will set precedents for that four corners in an environmental area. So we have to think about what is the right height there. I think there's general agreement that this is the place for density. It is the place for some height. We can expect height that's taller than anything around it, but 25 stories or so may be too much. We have to balance that against what we're getting for it. And I've heard a lot of concerns, and I know Ms. Leonard has too, as she mentioned, that's out of proportion to what was needed on this environmental site. The traffic is something we can't forget. I mean, how do we right-size parking requirements, for example, for a major transit corridor in an environmentally sensitive area? This is an area we can try out parking reductions that would make sense because it is on a Project Connect line. We should think about how we do that. The traffic is already a mess at that area right now where it comes into 71 and 360 on South Lamar. We don't want to exacerbate that, and we also want to take opportunities to think about how we can really take advantage of this as a transit hub. So with that said, I want to respond to the questions, quickly respond to the questions that were asked, and then give others an opportunity to speak. I already mentioned that I don't think that we are at the right level yet in terms of affordable housing. Because, and I really am talking about on-site affordable housing, so I'd like to talk about that more. I also think that there might be some additional work that needs to be done about the right mix of housing versus office versus hotel. I think there's a huge opportunity for this space for affordable housing for people. And so I think we want to get the right level of affordable housing, and I think we need to do as much as we possibly can. And I don't think we're there yet. I also want to, there's a lot that's already been a lot of feedback I know y'all have gotten on the environmental aspects of it. And I think that SOS, for example, and Save Barton Creek are reaching out to my colleagues. But the most important thing, and I think you mentioned this, is that we have a huge opportunity to help address climate change in this area, to look at net zero energy and water, and on-site reuse, and as you mentioned, shrinking impervious cover. We need to be careful and not double count the benefit of the redevelopment under the SOS ordinance, which does require a reduction in impervious cover. We don't want to double count that as our community benefit under a PUD. Flooding is a concern. We need to think about runoff into the creek is another concern. The height and the mobility. So I'd also like to see what this looks like from the Lamar side and from the neighborhoods that are on that side. It is absolutely critical, as you mentioned, the what's the impact to the green belt? But I think we need to see additional views because the greenbelt that we're seeing is just the greenbelt right below the development. There are other aspects of the greenbelt on the other side of 360 that we need to see what kind of views we're looking at. We also need to see what this does on Lamar itself. We don't want to create a canyon effect. We want a human scale infrastructure for an entrance. The other thing that's been real important is, and I think you mentioned this just as feedback, this is a huge opportunity for this whole area, and we want it to be a draw. So we want to have the right mix of retail, restaurant, creative space, housing, so that it becomes a place that's not just self-contained, but a place that people that live in this area can come to, will want to come to, can be there. So it's really for the whole area. And we'll have to work on the traffic issues and how people get there. You cannot, I mean, you can't walk there now. You take your life in your hands if you try to walk there now. So we have a huge opportunity to make improvements on that. The traffic issues, this may be a question for Jerry. Really want to understand what is planned by both Project Connect and the corridor improvement for South Lamar to address the traffic that's there now and the bottlenecks that we get there now at the intersections and how we can address that with this redevelopment. So I think those are the key things I wanted to point out. I want to say again that, as Jerry said, this is pretty much, from my perspective, it's pretty much just an old shopping center with a whole lot of concrete. And it's a huge opportunity for us, as you said, Jerry, to develop this in an exciting way and to get it right. But we really have to think about the environmental aspects, the affordable housing, transit line, and we have to think about what we're talking about in terms of the height, because that is the balance for us in terms of the affordable housing and the environmental aspects of it. So I know that we'll have a lot of conversations. The only question I would have for you right now, Jerry, is I'm assuming, can you speak to the intersection with Project Connect and the corridor plan in terms of how that works right now with this redevelopment and what's being done? What is being done and contemplated to address concerns about increased?
What we'll do, council member.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry. What we will do is we will work with Anique Baudet and the Project Connect office once the application comes in. We will make them a part of the review team, in addition to Austin Transportation Department and, of course, Cap Metro. But we will work with them closely on this project. This will be the first project that we'll be first large project that we'll be working with that office on. And what we'll do is we'll make them a part of the team who's actually doing the review.
Okay, can you give us the timeline and the process for this, just to remind folks?
Sure. Well, it's kind of, the applicant cannot submit the actual PUD until we've through with the briefing today. So after today, they can submit the project. It's up to them when they submit the project. I don't know when they're actually going to submit it. Once they actually submit it, I anticipate quite a few months, frankly, of negotiations with the city staff and all the different city departments and outside entities. It'll, I can't give you an exact timeline, but it'll be several months minimum, maybe closer, sometimes to a year. But we will go back and forth. We will formulate a staff recommendation, and then we will take it to the environmental board for their recommendation, and then we'll take it to the planning commission, and then we'll take it back to the city council. There may be other boards and commissions that get involved as well as we go through. We'll make that decision, but it'll probably be quite a while before it comes back to the city council, but I don't know exactly when.
Okay, I would recommend or ask that it also go to the Parks Board in addition to the Environmental Board and the Planning Commission. And then it's what's the level of approval that's required from the council?
Well, it's a zoning case, so it would just require provided there were no valid petition, it would require a majority of the council to approve the PUD.
Is there any additional nuance to the approval level because it's an SOS redevelopment?
Yes, I believe that does. I'd have to go back. I'd have to defer that to Chris Harrington, but I think that yes, it would require a greater number of votes under the redevelopment ordinance. And then also, if for some reason the planning commission did not recommend the case, it would require a supermajority of the city council to approve it because it's a PUD.
Okay, because it's coming under SOS as well as under the PUD, so there's two different aspects. Okay, if you could check that for us so we would know that.
Sure.
So, like I said, I have a lot of questions, but I want to give my colleagues an opportunity to ask any questions that they might have. Just reiterate what I said before. Huge opportunity to get it right. It's not just in some part of South Austin that doesn't impact anybody else. It is, like I said before, it's borders on Councilmember Ellis's district and mine. It is very close to Councilmember Tovo's and Renteria's. And just as precedent setting for our entire community because it is the first green environmental node.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. Councilor Ellis.
I'm happy to add my thoughts in. It's exciting that we're getting to see this presentation. I agree with a lot of the points that Councilmember Kitchen made. When I first thought about developing this area, I am interested in the conversation around, because I have this very similarly in my district around the Wyatt Oak Hill, where you have parking lots and you finally have an opportunity to put in better water quality protection and do something that's a little more woven in with the natural environment, which is exciting. One of the other first things I thought about is the bicycle connectivity. So I really wanted to see the renderings about that because I know that there are rapid metro lines right along there that take you down to that shopping center. But then if you were to try to tie into the Violet Crown Trail, there's not really a way to safely do that. And I think having a little more explicit and inviting space for people to be able to get through this area would be a fantastic opportunity to make sure that we are addressing all modes of transportation. I did like that Councilmember Kitchen talked about the idea of looking at the appropriate level of parking to be available, since it will have Metro Rapid bike infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure. So I'm really eager about that. I'm not sure how I feel right now on the height processing what the community benefits are, but I think it's a really incredible opportunity to look at what does redevelopment mean in 2021 and how can we make it a space that's really inviting for people and to kind of re-energize and reinvigorate a space that right now is kind of just a lot of cement and parking. So I am eager to see how we can move forward with this and what the conversation looks like and how the plan adapts.
Colleagues? Councilor Poole? And Councilmember Tovo.
I have a quick question for, I guess, Ms. Leonhardt. Are you looking at any underground passages from the site into Guestford Park? It looks like there's a fairly wide, is it an access road off to the west between, or is that Lamar? I couldn't tell the orientation on the map. Could you throw that map back up? Just let me know how you are imagining, or how far along you are in imagining how, if you're in the site or want to get into the site and you're not in a car, how will you be able to transit those Lamar and any access roads going down to the loop?
Well, unmute myself. I can't pull the slide back up, but if somebody else could, that'd be great. But we are anticipating at least a shared use path, perhaps cycle track all the way through the site that would tie into the bicycle improvements already planned for South Lamar and connect it over on the other side to the access road that goes down to the office. So yeah, there we go.
So are you going to go under? Are you going to go under those traffic lanes? Will you be tunneling under those traffic lanes?
Of South Lamar? No tunneling. Yeah.
So what's this? So there isn't any way to horizontally cross those roads. You have to follow the trails that go parallel and then come back up and around, go to a traffic light.
So I think if I'm hearing you right, Councilmember Poole, because you were cutting out just a hair, Once you get to the edge of the site, your connectivity would be at grade with traffic. So on the 360 side, I think what you would do is go down, and we are proposing a shared use path down that access road that goes from our retail site down to the office site.
Parallel to
Yes.
the access road. Okay.
Yes, correct.
So I'm interested, and I know it's early days, but I am interested in whether, kind of like what we've done up at, I think it's Sand Beach, we are looking at doing a tunnel to get up to like 4th Street or 5th Street because of the grade change is so steep. I'd like to have some conversation about, I see where you have, and I'm sitting here pointing to your slide, which of course you can't see what I'm pointing at, but where you have the little bit of green, those 6 little green dot trees kind of going off to the west.
Yes.
Like, would it even be appropriate to put a tunnel so that people could go underneath those lanes of traffic to get more quickly to the other side of the road? And then the same thing over on Lamar. I can see, and I know there are more traffic lights over there but it's really congested, and that spaghetti bowl is really tough, and it's not attractive on a bicycle. I wouldn't try it, which is why we go all the way around, take other routes. And so maybe it's not feasible, but I wanted to raise the question this early in the process to give that time to settle and see if there was something we might be able to accomplish.
We will take a look at that.
That's all I can ask at this point. Thanks.
Okay, Kathy?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, and thank you, Councilmember Kitchen, for really articulating what I think are some very important areas of consideration as this project continues to talk with neighboring stakeholders and others about what the vision is for this site. I want to be sure I kind of can capture in my head some of the superiority elements. So I wonder if you could just cite for me what you see as the top superiority elements that you are putting forward. And then I know there's been discussion about the affordable housing components, but if you would just again summarize for me what exactly the commitment is to affordable housing and how much of that is on site. And I share Councilmember Kitchen's comments that, you know, in my opinion, there should be really significant affordable housing here available on site.
Sure, happy to. I think our main superiority item is impervious cover. It's really challenging to peel back 36% of the site is impervious cover. And so that is the heaviest lift on this project, and we believe something that many, actually everybody we've talked to is happy with that level of commitment to impervious cover. In terms of other commitments, we are working with Cap Metro to improve the transit stop on site. We are proposing connectivity to the Greenbelt, which doesn't exist there now, and park improvements on site as well. Right now, there's very little park improvements in Gusford Park. And we are going to create that trailhead, as I mentioned, as part of that. In terms specifically about affordable housing, as you know, the PUD ordinance requires 10% of the rental units, for rental units, 10% of the bonus area, and for ownership units, 5% of the bonus area on site. And then for non-residential developments, a payment in lieu of $7 per square foot right now. What we are offering as superiority at this time is 10% of the bonus area as on-site affordable housing, regardless of whether it's rental or ownership. And so we are excited to do that. Also, we're proposing all housing on site without requesting a fee in lieu, even though most of our bonus square footage is non-residential. And so that is another superiority item as well. And we've been, working with the housing staff at the city to understand what income groups and things they're interested in seeing, and working through partnerships potential partnerships with groups like Community Foundation or others, Habitat for Humanity or others.
Thank you. So I think from what I'm understanding, you are at this point, 10% of the units be of rental or ownership be affordable. So that's a little bit higher than it's from 5% to 10% for the ownership units. I would need to kind of better understand what the breakdown is between ownership and rental as it's contemplated at this stage to really know how significant that is in terms of the number of units. And you are not proposing a fee in lieu for the non-residential. It would be on-site units as well. And then, so again, I'll need to see kind of what the commensurate
Kathy, you're muted.
I can't hear you.
Oh, really? Not any of it?
No, just the last two sentences.
Oh, okay. What were the last two sentences? Oh, I guess I was just saying I would need to know what the breakdown is in terms of contemplated ownership units versus rental to really better understand kind of how that shift from 5% to 10% really results in how many units that results in. And I guess it would be, I don't think that the PUD ordinance really fully captures this goal. It's important to me to see those units be really multi-bedroom units so that we're supporting what I heard you describe as the mission of really creating a more family-friendly development on this important corridor. The question, do you intend to incorporate the jumpy house? I'm really just kidding. That's like, I have to ask that for my children's sake. We've spent many, many years there.
You got muted again.
I would like to understand that really was just a joke about the jumpy house. Of course, I don't expect you to incorporate the jumpy house. The next question is for our staff. Thank you for explaining the impervious cover. Obviously, that's a very significant shift and an important one in this environmentally sensitive area. Jerry, can you help me understand how much of that would have been required under conventional zoning if the site's redeveloped?
Well, Councilmember, the zoning would not play a factor in that. What would play a factor is the SOS redevelopment ordinance. And so as long as they comply with the SOS redevelopment ordinance, they could get it approved with a simple majority of the city council. As to the particulars of what would be required under the SOS redevelopment ordinance, I'd have to defer to Chris Harrington for that.
Is Chris Harrington on the line? I guess as with all of these different elements that are being offered as evidence of superiority, I'm going to really want the staff report to explain what would be required under conventional zoning or other ordinances versus what is being offered in the PUD, because our task as decision makers is to evaluate whether the planned unit development that's being proposed is superior to what could be developed under our existing codes and ordinances. So that's really the gist of my question here with regard to the impervious cover reduction. How much of that would be required if this site proceeded not as a PUD, but under conventional zoning in accordance with our redevelopment ordinance?
And Councilmember, I know Chris is on the call. I think he's been trying to be moved over right now. I don't know if he has enough information to provide a direct answer to that question right now, but I know he's on the call and trying to get on.
And if it's complicated to do that, maybe somebody can just get back to me about what, I think it was 34% or 36% impervious cover reduction. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
34 or 36?
I think it was 36.
Councilmember Chillo.
Yeah. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Thanks.
Chris Harrington, Environmental Officer. So the redevelopment exception would allow them to redevelop the existing footprint of impervious cover without having to reduce the impervious cover at all. They would just have to provide water quality treatment. and then mitigation land or payment for mitigation land to get to an equivalent level of impervious cover. So they're proposing something different. We would evaluate superiority in a different way, not with the redevelopment exception as the baseline, but relative to the current condition effectively, and then what would be achievable under current code. So as was mentioned, and I think was very well received by the Environmental Commission, the reduction of impervious cover that is proposed is a significant superiority in terms of basically just leaving the existing impervious cover, since they would be achieving SOS levels of water quality treatment under either circumstance.
Thanks for that. It's been a while since we talked about the redevelopment exception, so I'd forgotten that those details. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Back to the green space, and I guess this question is for the developer representative. Back to the green space identification of green space. Can you remind me again exactly? I know you talked about the trailhead, the connectivity to the Greenbelt trailhead.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the dedication of land on your track to green space, what was that figure again?
We have 13.7 acres of green space on our site and 4 park spaces, and they will all be publicly accessible. And we have proposed that they be privately owned, but have a public easement on them, mainly for the purposes of, controlling the operations and maintenance more. And that's on site, 13.7 acres.
Kathy, can't hear you again.
Sorry, I'm having difficulties here today. Do you know what would have been required in terms of acreage under the parkland dedication? And is all of the land that's going to be dedicated to open space, developable land on your tract?
So it's approximately 31 acres, if I recall. I don't have the number right in front of me, that would be required by parkland dedication under our estimates. And if we weren't pursuing a PUD, I think we would be capped at 15% of that on site because of we're in a parkland deficient area. And so that's approximately 5.6 acres, I believe. And all of the parkland that we are offering is developable.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So the shift, 31 acres under the parkland dedication, 15% of that would have been required to be on site. Okay, thank you very much.
And again, those are from memory, so I'm not exactly.
But that gives me a sense of scale. So it's significantly more than would have been required on site.
Yes, ma'am.
About twice as much as would have been required on site. Thank you for that info.
Okay. Councilmember Kitchen and Councilmember Ellis.
Jerry, I think it would be helpful if you could provide to us, I know you will do this at some point, but sooner rather than later would be helpful for us because there's so many moving parts to this. If you would provide us with the requirements for each, the SOS redevelopment ordinance, the parks requirements, so that we can see the requirements for each. And we want to, so that table will help us clarify. Let me back to it. I'd like to see a table of what would be required for the SOS redevelopment ordinance, what would be required for parks, what would be required for housing. Okay. And then I'd like to see the list of items that are being put forward as community benefits. What I want to make sure of is that we understand those different parts and we aren't double counting a community benefit as something that would be a requirement. Because there's so many different aspects to this, it would be helpful if you could create that list for all of us. Does that make sense what I'm asking for, Jerry?
Yes, it does, Councilmember, and I can work on putting that together. However, it would have the caveat that at this time, it would be the numbers that are given to us in the development assessment. Once the actual application is submitted, we'd have to relook to make sure that the numbers match what they're right now telling us they plan to submit versus what they do actually submit. So, yes, I do understand.
Okay. Well, that makes sense, but you can give it, at least get us started with what the requirements say, so, thank
Yes,
you.
we can. Sure.
Councilmember Kitchen, also just to add on to that, there's some additional information in the staff report that's posted in backup that Atha Phillips has provided on the redevelopment exception, but we would certainly, as is our standard practice, bring forward a superiority table that would be a comparison to the current applicable code, what they're proposing, and then we would also just include a line item for the redevelopment exception since it is another yardstick against which we can measure this project.
Okay, and then question to that is just the baseline that we're starting with. My understanding is that the original agreement for this tract, for this area, had differing heights that were agreed to. They were 30 feet or I forget what all were. And there were other aspects of that agreement. I think Ms. Leonard referenced the original agreement that, that gave parkland and also gave the land for this particular shopping center. But I want to, I'm thinking that our baseline here goes back to that agreement. I want to understand how that agreement plays into the analysis.
Yes, move it. I'll let Jerry speak to the height issues. That wouldn't be me, but certainly looking at the easements that are existing or that are created on parkland that would allow for infrastructure on what is now city parkland has already been an item of discussion for both watershed and for the Parks Department. And so we would consider any, as we always do, what the existing entitlements are for the development as part of our superiority analysis. But I don't know if Jerry, if you have anything else for the height questions.
And by existing entitlements, you mean what's in the agreement, what's in code, but because there's covenants on that property. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember, with regard to height, per code, we'd be looking at the existing entitlements under zoning. So in this case, it would be the 60 feet under the GR zoning.
Jerry, why would we not be looking at I may have this wrong, but I thought there were restrictive covenants on the property. Why would we not be looking at that?
I would have to go back and look at those restricted covenants. We have not gotten to that part as part of this review, so let me go back and find out more about those. I'm just letting you know that the code says that the baseline is the based upon the existing zoning, so I'd have to look to see if there's a difference between the restricted covenants and the zoning. I'm not aware enough information about the covenants right now, so I'll have to get back to you on that part.
Okay, and the reason I'm asking that, of course, is because if we're talking about superiority under PUD, we have to think in terms of what's in place now as a restrictive covenant in place right now, because that was all a part of the arrangement that was made for the Greenbelt. So it has to do with what was considered to be appropriate along the Greenbelt and what was the appropriate trade at that time. We could certainly revisit them, but we need to not just set them aside without having the conversation about them.
Understood.
You're on mute, but I think I saw my name.
Alice. Yeah.
I had just forgotten to mention, but I wrote down and wanted to make sure I talked about it here, but I would like to know more about the walkability. Like, is the retail going to be mostly all on the first floor? Is it going to be a mix of story or how that's going to work? So maybe just in the future when we talk about this, I'd like a little more understanding of how that would map out. I think that if you're having a walkable, transit-oriented PUD situation, that it could be a great opportunity to make sure that lots of shops and retail and coffee and market space and things like that for people to be able to access.
Would you like me to answer that now, or? We're intending ground floor retail all around that central green. And to the extent that we can support retail, connecting it to the transit station as well, transit stop as well.
That's great. If you'd have that all planned out yet, but I do appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, you have something?
Yes, I had a quick follow-up question to what Councilmember Kitchen was asking Jerry. Jerry, I understand your response that you haven't reviewed the restrictive covenants. But if the restrictive covenants imposed a height limit on certain tracks, I assume that would be the baseline. Something in what you said suggested that maybe would you agree with that?
Yes, Councilmember, I understand what you're getting at. Again, I need to look back at the covenants to see exactly what they say. My recollection of the PUD ordinance was established as the baseline as the existing zoning, as opposed to, a restriction. But I understand the concept that the baseline, in theory, is what the existing entitlement is, as opposed to maybe the zoning. The entitlement may be different than the zoning because of a restricted covenant. So I understand exactly what you're getting at. But I will have to go back and look at the exact wording of the PUD ordinance, and I'd have to go back and look at and see what the restricted covenant says. So that'll be part of our review when the application is submitted. We'll look into that part of it.
Kathy, you're muted.
I'm sorry, I'm like really not on my game today with the technology. I was just saying, thanks for the clarification. So it sounds as if it's not just a question for you. It's not just a question about what's in the restrictive covenant. It's about also what exact language is in the PUD ordinance and how that interfaces with the restrictive covenant. And I guess, let me just say, I think the intent, I would really say that I believe the intent of the PUD ordinance in terms of setting the baseline was to kind of capture, as the baseline, capture what is possible on that tract without any shift to PUD. So I would say that the restrictive covenant is really the baseline. Whatever the restrictive covenant is, should be the base entitlement or the entitlement that factors into what that baseline is determined to be. So we may not all be in agreement on that, but I would just put that forward. And as somebody who long decades ago served on that committee, I would say that seems to me reflective of the intent of that PUD revision. But thanks, Terry.
Peel.
Thank you, Mayor. And, this is very exciting for that section of town to have, a little bit more density on apartments and affordable housing. I also would like to find out, this little corner there has a lot of popular restaurants that people do go, and it's considered as affordable services, and I hope that you will be able to keep some of those service and restaurants and small businesses on that location. I've noticed that sometimes we kind of lose the old family type restaurants that people like to go and eat there. You got a great Italian little restaurant there, and some grills and bars that plays music there. So I hope that when you do this development, that we do keep these types of affordable service there for the population, because it's those places attract a lot of people, and you got that little grocery store makes it feel more like the mom and pop type store than these big corporation stores. So I hope that we keep that when we do go through the development process.
Thank you, Ann. And then Leslie.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that, Councilmember Renteria. I think that goes, Ms. Leonard, I think that goes to, I know you talked about maintaining the character of South Austin, and Councilmember Renteria is mentioning one aspect of that, and that goes to my comment that I said earlier about we want this to continue to be a space that the neighbors want to go to, and so that it's not just a space for people that are actually living at the housing there. So one important aspect of that is really maintaining that accessibility for people, with the restaurants that are there. And Councilmember Renteria said it better than I, but that kind of feel and access for the people that live around there is really important.
Leslie.
Thanks. I wanted to emphasize the points that both Ann and Kathy are making to Jerry about the restrictive covenant. And the reason why I want to emphasize that is I want to make sure that when we're talking about what the baseline is going to be here, that we don't, the early information is super important, and it needs to be as accurate based on what can be built here, based on previous covenants and zoning. And if we give the public one reading and then we come back later and say, well, we can't do that because we have this restrictive covenant, then they will have two different pieces of information and won't be able to align them both. So I think we need to be really careful in these reviews to make sure that whatever the initial information is that comes out, and Jerry, you can help us tremendously with this, is actually what, as both Ann and Kathy are saying, was agreed upon at the time that could be built as the baseline. Does that make sense, Jerry?
Yes, I understand.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Colleagues, any other comments on this plan? Okay. I think it's an exciting plan. It's an important piece of property. Obviously has a huge impact locally. Also by all our planning documents is a regional track and a convergence of a lot of transit. So my hope is that we have a project here that is a benefit to and the entire city. And I think that this has the opportunity to do that. Anything else? All right, I think we're done with that presentation, Manager. Colleagues, it is 12:20. Do you want to pick up one of the other two briefings, homelessness or spending, or do you want to take an hour break now? We have the executive session with the 3 personnel matters. We had talked about setting a special called meeting to do personnel conversation. As a follow-up, we were going to do the manager in order to be able to free up time. I guess we could consider doing all 4 of those at the special call. I know they're trying to set up for next week. I just throw that idea out there. Do you guys want to take a break now, or do you want to do another briefing? Kathy?
Take a break now.
I would say let's not try to do a briefing, but perhaps we could, is there anything short on the list that we could knock off of the called items?
Well, we could,
Maybe we could knock out one of them.
okay, let's